Your late brother stole 50 million from my company. The words cut through the hospital's fluorescent hum like a scalpel. Nurse Jean Wu froze, his hands still gripping the exit door handle. The weight of a 16-hour shift suddenly nothing compared to the ice forming in his stomach. Two men in tailored black suits flanked the doorway, their presence transforming the familiar hospital corridor into something from a nightmare. Between them stood a figure that commanded attention without effort, tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of cold authority that made seasoned doctors step aside in operating rooms. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person." Jean Wu's voice carried the professional calm he'd perfected through years of delivering bad news to families. But his pulse hammered against his throat. The man in the center, clearly the one in charge, tilted his head with predatory patience. "Jean Wu, 26 years old. Lost your parents in a car accident 3 years ago. Your brother Min Jae died 6 months later in a motorcycle crash." His voice was silk wrapped around steel. "Your brother worked for my company. He stole from me before he died." The hospital corridor seemed to stretch and contract around Jean Wu's vision. Min Jae had been reckless, yes, but a thief? The brother who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for Jean Wu's nursing school? That's impossible. The words came out stronger than he felt. Min Jae would never. 50 million, one doesn't lie. The man stepped closer, and Jean Wu caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker. Power, maybe, or the absence of mercy. "I'm Kang Jae, CEO of Kang Industries. Your brother was my head accountant." The name hit like a physical blow. Everyone knew Kang Industries, the construction empire that built half of Seoul's skyline. And everyone whispered about Kang Jae's ruthlessness, how he destroyed competitors without blinking. Even if that were true, Jean Wu said, forcing himself to meet those calculating eyes, his debts died with him. "I'm not responsible for blood debts transfer." Kang Jae's smile was winter incarnate. "In my world, family pays for family. Always." The two suits moved closer, not threatening exactly, but making it clear that Jean Wu's options were rapidly narrowing. Other hospital staff had noticed the commotion. He caught sight of Dr. Kim pretending to read a chart while obviously eavesdropping. "I don't have 50 million won." The admission tasted like defeat. "I barely make enough to cover my rent." "I know." Kang Jae pulled out his phone, swiped once, then held it up. Jean Wu's bank account balance glowed on the screen. Embarrassingly small, with rent due in 5 days and his credit cards already maxed. "Which is why you'll work off the debt instead." The corridor tilted. "Work it off how?" "You'll live in my house. Take care of my son. Cook, clean, tutor him. Whatever I decide you owe me for each day." Kang Jae's tone suggested he was discussing the weather. "At minimum wage, that's roughly 8 years." 8 years. The number echoed in Jean Wu's skull like a death sentence. 8 years of his life, stolen because of something his brother allegedly did. 8 years under the thumb of a man whose reputation for cruelty was legendary, even among Seoul's business elite. "I'll call the police." The threat sounded hollow, even to his own ears. "And tell them what? That I've offered you a job?" Kang Jae's laugh held no warmth. "Your brother signed papers. I have documentation of every transaction. The police will side with the evidence." Jean Wu's hands trembled, from exhaustion, rage, or fear. He couldn't tell anymore. Around them, the hospital continued its rhythm of life and death, oblivious to the fact that his entire future was being rewritten in a sterile hallway. "I need time to think." "You have 30 seconds. Kang Jae checked his watch with theatrical precision. "After that, I pursue other methods of collection. And trust me, those methods are considerably less comfortable." The threat hung between them like a blade. Jean Wu thought of his tiny studio apartment, the job that barely paid his bills, the loneliness that had consumed him since Min Jae's death. What did he really have to lose? But 8 years. 8 years of servitude to a man who viewed him as property. "What guarantee do I have that you'll honor the arrangement?" Jean Wu asked, hating how small his voice sounded. "That you won't just keep me indefinitely?" "You have my word." Kang Jae's expression didn't shift. "When your debt is paid, you're free. I don't keep things I no longer need." The casual cruelty of that statement, being referred to as a thing, should have sparked more anger. Instead, Jin-woo felt something inside him go numb. Maybe that was better. Anger would only make the next 8 years unbearable. My job. We'll understand when you explain the family emergency. Kang Jae nodded toward one of his men. Pack whatever you need. We leave now. The world moved too fast after that. Jin-woo found himself in the passenger seat of a sleek black sedan, watching Seoul blur past the windows as they drove toward Gangnam District. The driver said nothing. Kang Jae worked silently on his tablet, occasionally taking calls in clipped, authoritative tones. Jin-woo pressed his forehead against the cool window glass and tried to process what had just happened. This morning, his biggest concern had been whether Mrs. Park in room 304 would respond to the new medication. Now he was essentially an indentured servant, bound to a man who looked at him like a particularly annoying problem to be solved. The car turned into an exclusive neighborhood where houses hid behind high walls and elaborate gates. Old soul money lived here, the kind of wealth that bought silence and looked the other way when inconvenient questions arose. Welcome to your new home. Kang Jae's voice held no warmth as the car stopped before imposing iron gates that swung open at their approach. The mansion beyond was a study in intimidation, all sharp angles and cold marble, with windows that reflected rather than welcomed. It looked exactly like the kind of place where a man like Kang Jae would live. Elegant, expensive, and utterly without soul. As they pulled into the circular driveway, Jin-woo caught sight of a small face pressed against an upstairs window, a child with messy hair and curious eyes who disappeared the moment their gazes met. Your son? He asked. Lee Jun. He's 7. Kang Jae's tone suggested this was all the information Jin-woo needed or deserved. He's difficult. The car stopped. Jin-woo stared at the mansion's imposing entrance and wondered if this was how prisoners felt when they first saw their cells. 8 years. He could survive anything for 8 years. He had to. Would you stay and fight for your freedom, or swallow your pride to survive? The question formed unbidden in his mind as Kang Jae opened his door. Before we go deeper into this twisted bargain, remember that sometimes the chains we accept become the keys to futures we never imagined. But as he followed Kang Jae toward those imposing doors, Jin-woo couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something far more dangerous than simple servitude. The mansion's interior struck Jin-woo like a physical blow. All marble floors and crystalline chandeliers that threw fractured light across surfaces too perfect to touch. Every piece of furniture screamed wealth, from the Italian leather sofas to the abstract paintings that probably cost more than his yearly salary. These are your quarters. Kang Jae pushed open a door near the kitchen, revealing a small but immaculate room with a single bed, desk, and window overlooking the gardens. You'll sleep here. Nowhere else. Jin-woo stepped inside, noting the heavy lock on the outside of the door. A servant's room. A prisoner's cell with better lighting. The rules are simple. Kang Jae's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. You wake at 5:30. Breakfast ready by 7. June leaves for school at 8:15. You'll pack his lunch and walk him to the car. While he's gone, you clean, do laundry, prepare dinner. He returns at 4. You'll supervise homework and activities until bedtime at 9. What about weekends? You work weekends. This isn't a job, Jin-woo. It's restitution. Kang Jae's eyes held no sympathy. You don't leave the property without permission. You don't use the main phone. Your meals are eaten in the kitchen, never the dining room. And you speak when spoken to. The list continued, a catalog of restrictions designed to strip away every shred of independence. No personal visitors. No contact with outside friends without approval. No access to the internet except for June's educational needs. Any questions? What if I get sick? Don't. Kang Jae checked his watch. June will be home soon. Try not to disappoint him on your first day. Alone in his new prison, Jin-woo unpacked his single suitcase into the cramped dresser. 3 sets of scrubs, some casual clothes, his nursing textbooks, the pathetic sum of his adult life. He'd left behind his few pieces of furniture, his small collection of movies, even the plant Min Jae had given him for his birthday. The sound of a car in the driveway announced June's arrival. Jin Woo positioned himself in the kitchen, uncertain whether he should greet the child or wait for instruction. What burst through the door wasn't the polite, well-mannered child he'd expected from such wealth. June exploded into the foyer like a small tornado, backpack flung aside, shoes kicked off in opposite directions, school uniform already disheveled beyond repair. I hate math. I hate my teacher. And I especially hate stupid Kim Tae-ho, who said my drawing looked like vomit. June. Kong Jae's voice cracked like a whip. Manners. The boy spun around, finally noticing Jin Woo standing awkwardly by the kitchen island. His face was flushed with anger and exhaustion, dark hair sticking up at impossible angles. Who's he? June demanded, pointing with the casual rudeness only children could manage. This is Jin Woo. He'll be helping around the house. Kong Jae's explanation was deliberately vague. You'll treat him with respect. Is he the new housekeeper? Mrs. Kim said she was quitting because you're mean to everyone. Kong Jae's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Jin will be tutoring you as well. Your grades need improvement. I don't need a tutor. June's voice pitched higher. I need you to actually come to my school presentations instead of sending Secretary Park. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Kong Jae's expression went completely blank, the kind of terrifying calm that Jin Woo had seen in surgeons' moments before they delivered devastating news. Go to your room. Do your homework. I don't want to. Now. June's face crumpled, but instead of obeying, he grabbed a crystal paperweight from the hall table and hurled it at the wall. It shattered against the marble with a sound like breaking bones. I hate living here. I hate you. I want my mom. The words seemed to physically strike Kong Jae. His face went white, then red, emotions flickering across his features too quickly to catalog. Jin Woo stepped forward instinctively, his nursing training recognizing a child in genuine distress. Hey! He crouched to June's eye level, keeping his voice gentle. That was a pretty good throw. You've got quite an arm. June wiped his nose on his sleeve, studying Jin Woo with suspicious eyes. Are you making fun of me? Not at all. I'm impressed. Most adults couldn't get that kind of distance. Jin Woo glanced at the scattered crystal. Though maybe next time, we find something less expensive to demonstrate with. Despite himself, June's mouth twitched upward. Father says I have destructive tendencies. Well, everyone needs hobbies. Jin Woo's deadpan delivery earned a genuine giggle. But how about we channel that energy into homework? I bet you could destroy some math problems with that same intensity. Math is stupid. Math is everywhere. How do you think they calculate the trajectory for throwing things? Jin Woo stood, offering his hand. Come on, show me what you're working on. To his surprise, June took his hand without hesitation. As they headed toward the stairs, Jin Woo caught Kong Jae watching them with an unreadable expression. June's room was a study in contrasts. Expensive toys mixed with crude drawings taped to the walls, designer furniture bearing the scars of childish experiments. The bed was unmade, clothes scattered across every surface. So, Jin Woo cleared a space at the desk. What subject do you hate most? All of them, but especially reading. The words get jumbled sometimes. Jin Woo's nursing background kicked in. He'd seen enough children with learning difficulties to recognize the signs. Does your father know about the word jumbling? He just says I need to try harder. June's voice went small. He says Mom was smart, and I should be too. The casual mention of June's mother, and Kong Jae's apparent inability to discuss her, painted a picture of a household drowning in unprocessed grief. Jin Woo had seen it countless times in the hospital. Families torn apart not by the loss itself, but by their inability to share the burden. Your mom would be proud of you regardless. Jin Woo meant it, and we'll figure out strategies to make the words behave better. Deal. For the next hour, Jin Woo worked with June on his homework, discovering that the boy was actually quite bright when approached correctly. He just needed someone patient enough to let him learn at his own pace. You're different from the other tutors, June said, carefully writing out his spelling words. You don't get mad when I mess up. Mistakes are how we learn. If you got everything right the first time, you wouldn't need school. Father expects me to get everything right. The simple statement carried enormous weight. Jinwoo looked at this 7-year-old boy, already carrying the impossible burden of perfectionist expectations, and felt something crack inside his chest. Your father expects a lot from everyone, including himself. It was the most diplomatic way he could phrase it. But you're a kid. Being a kid means making mistakes. He doesn't make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, June. Even your father. The boy looked up with eyes far too old for his face. Did you make mistakes when you were little? Constantly. I once tried to give our goldfish a bath because I thought he looked dirty. Nearly killed poor Goldie with soap. June dissolved into giggles. That's so dumb. Exactly. But I learned that fish don't need baths, which was useful information for the future. They were interrupted by the soft chime of the dinner hour. Jinwoo had completely lost track of time, something that hadn't happened since Min Jae's death. I should start dinner. Can you make something good? Mrs. Kim only knew how to make boring healthy food. Jinwoo smiled. I'll see what I can do. The kitchen was a chef's dream. Professional-grade appliances, marble countertops, a pantry stocked with ingredients he'd only seen in cooking shows. But it felt sterile and used except for the most basic functions. He found chicken in the refrigerator, vegetables in the crisper, and set about making a simple stir-fry. Nothing fancy, but seasoned with the kind of care that had been missing from this house. June appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sizzling sounds and aromatic spices. It smells amazing. Can I help? Can you wash vegetables without destroying them? Probably. They worked together in comfortable silence, June chattering about his day between tasks. Jinwoo found himself genuinely enjoying the child's company, something he hadn't expected when he'd imagined this arrangement. Kong Jae appeared precisely at 7, his business suit exchanged for casual slacks and a button-down shirt that somehow made him look more intimidating rather than less. He surveyed the domestic scene with that same unreadable expression. Dinner's ready, Jinwoo announced, plating the stir-fry with practiced efficiency. They ate in the formal dining room, June chattering about his improved homework performance, while Kong Jae listened with the attention of someone conducting a business meeting. Jinwoo ate silently, hyper-aware of every sound his fork made against the expensive china. This is really good, June said between bites. Way better than Mrs. Kim's food. Mrs. Kim was adequate. Kong Jae's tone suggested the subject was closed. She was boring. Jinwoo taught me about math trajectories and helped with my jumbled words and made dinner smell like Grandma's house used to. Kong Jae's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Jumbled words. Sometimes letters switch places when I read. Jinwoo says it's normal and we'll work on strategies. Father and son stared at each other across the table. June with innocent expectation, Kong Jae with something that might have been surprise or possibly guilt. I wasn't aware you were having reading difficulties. I told you lots of times. You said I needed to concentrate better. The silence that followed was deafening. Jinwoo focused on his plate, unwilling to witness whatever realization was dawning on Kong Jae's face. We'll discuss this later, Kong Jae said finally. Finish your dinner. But the damage was done. The mask had slipped just enough to reveal that perhaps the cold, controlling businessman was also a father who had failed to hear his son's cries for help. 3 weeks into his imprisonment, Jinwoo discovered that Kong Jae worked past midnight most nights. The sound of fingers striking laptop keys echoed through the mansion's marble corridors like digital rain, punctuated by the occasional sharp intake of breath that suggested frustration rather than fatigue. Jinwoo had been retrieving June's forgotten water bottle from the kitchen when he noticed light bleeding from beneath Kong Jae's home office door. Through the gap, he could see expensive leather shoes kicked carelessly aside, suit jacket draped over a chair back with uncharacteristic disorder. He should have retreated to his room, should have minded his own business, and maintained the careful distance that had defined their interactions since that first dinner confrontation. Instead, he knocked. Come in. Kong Jae looked up from his computer screen, and Jinwoo was startled by the exhaustion etched into features that normally appeared carved from granite. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal surprisingly elegant forearms marked with small scars. evidence of a childhood less privileged than his current circumstances suggested. "It's past 2 in the morning," Jean Wu said, setting down a cup of coffee he'd prepared without conscious thought. "You'll make yourself sick. Concern about your employer's health?" The sarcasm lacked its usual bite, blunted by fatigue. Concern about Jun's father collapsing from exhaustion. The words came out more honestly than he'd intended. He's already lost one parent. Kong Jae's fingers stilled on the keyboard. His mother didn't die from overwork. Cancer. Car accident. 3 years ago. Each word seemed extracted with surgical precision. She was coming home from Jun's school play. I was supposed to go with her, but I had a merger to finalize. The admission hung between them like a confession in an empty church. Jean Wu understood now. The guilt that drove Kong Jae's relentless work schedule, the inability to connect with his son, the household run with military precision to avoid any hint of chaos that might remind him of what he'd lost. Jun mentioned his mother was smart, brilliant. She was finishing her doctorate in child psychology when we met. A ghost of a smile crossed Kong Jae's face. She would have known what to do about his reading problems. Would have noticed months ago. Jean Wu moved closer, drawn by something vulnerable in Kong Jae's voice. "You can still learn. Jun just needs patience and different strategies." "I don't have patience for anything anymore." Kong Jae rubbed his temples. "Some days I look at him and see her eyes, her smile. Other days I see a stranger I don't know how to reach." The honesty was so unexpected that Jean Wu found himself sitting in the chair opposite Kong Jae's desk, crossing a boundary he'd maintained religiously for weeks. "Grief makes everything complicated. You sound like you speak from experience." "My brother." 6 months ago, Jean Wu surprised himself by offering the information freely. "Some days I forget he's gone and reach for my phone to tell him something stupid. Other days the silence is so heavy I can barely breathe." They sat in the pool of lamplight, two men bound by loss and circumstance, sharing the kind of conversation that only happens in the small hours when defenses crumble under exhaustion. "Your brother, Min Jae, what was he like?" The question caught Jean Wu off guard. In all their interactions, Kong Jae had never shown interest in Min Jae as a person rather than a liability. Reckless. Funny. He could make friends with anyone within 5 minutes of meeting them. Jean Wu's voice softened with memory. He used to say I was too serious, that I needed to learn how to live instead of just surviving. Sounds like he was right. Maybe. Jean Wu met Kong Jae's eyes across the desk. "What about Jun's mother? What was she like?" "Everything I'm not. Warm, spontaneous, could turn grocery shopping into an adventure." Kong Jae's expression grew distant. "She used to say I thought too much and felt too little, that I missed my own life if I wasn't careful." The parallel struck them both silent. Two dead siblings, both trying to teach the living how to embrace life rather than merely endure it. Kong Jae reached across the desk for his coffee cup, and his fingers brushed Jean Wu's hand. The contact was brief, accidental, but it sent an unexpected shock of awareness through Jean Wu's system. "You should get some sleep," Jean Wu said, standing abruptly. "Should I?" Kong Jae's voice held a note Jean Wu couldn't identify. "And what about you? Do you sleep, Jean Wu, or do you lie awake planning your escape?" The question was loaded with implications Jean Wu wasn't ready to examine. "I think about a lot of things, such as whether Jun's nightmares are getting better, whether you eat enough during the day, whether this arrangement is destroying us both or somehow saving us." The admission escaped before Jean Wu could stop it. Kong Jae stood as well, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "And what conclusion have you reached?" "That I don't know the difference anymore." They were standing closer than propriety allowed, close enough that Jean Wu could see flecks of gold in Kong Jae's dark eyes, could smell the subtle cologne that clung to his shirt. "Jean Wu, Daddy." Jun's voice shattered the moment like breaking glass. "I had the scary dream again." They sprang apart, but Jean Wu caught the way Kong Jae's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his suit jacket. "I'll handle this," Jean Wu said quickly. "No." Kong Jae's voice regained its familiar authority. "He's my son." But when they reached Jun's room, the boy was already climbing into bed, having apparently conquered the nightmare on his own. Did you have the one about the dark water again? Jinwoo asked, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Yeah, but I remembered what you taught me about changing the story in my head. I turned the water into chocolate milk. Clever solution. Jinwoo smoothed Jun's hair away from his forehead. Think you can sleep now? Can you stay until I fall asleep? Both of you. Jinwoo glanced at Kong Jae, who looked as surprised by the request as he was. Your father has work to finish. It can wait. Kong Jae sat in the chair beside Jun's bed, his expression carefully neutral. 10 minutes. They maintained an awkward silence while Jun's breathing gradually deepened into sleep. In the dim glow of the nightlight, father and son looked remarkably similar. The same stubborn jawline, the same thick lashes. He looks peaceful when he sleeps, Jinwoo whispered. He looks like her. The simple statement carried enormous weight. Jinwoo understood now why Kong Jae struggled with bedtime routines, why he delegated so much of Jun's care to others. Every quiet moment with his son was a reminder of the woman he'd lost. They crept from the room like conspirators, but instead of parting ways at the hallway, Kong Jae followed Jinwoo toward the kitchen. I should check your hand, Jinwoo said, noticing the bandage wrapped around Kong Jae's palm. When did you hurt it? This afternoon. Broken glass from Jun's science experiment gone wrong. Kong Jae held up the injured hand with rueful amusement. Apparently volcanoes require more supervision than I anticipated. Sit. Jinwoo gestured toward the kitchen island. Let me look. He unwrapped the bandage with practiced efficiency, his nursing training taking over. The cut was clean but deep, professionally sutured but showing signs of irritation. You didn't clean this properly. Jinwoo's fingers probed gently around the wound. It could get infected. I don't have time for infections. You'll have even less time if it develops sepsis. Jinwoo disappeared into the supply closet, returning with antiseptic and fresh bandages. This might sting. Kong Jae didn't flinch as Jinwoo cleaned the wound, but his breathing changed, became more measured, controlled. Jinwoo found himself acutely aware of the warmth of Kong Jae's skin beneath his fingers, the steady pulse at his wrist. You're very gentle. The observation came out rougher than intended. Practice. Jinwoo focused on wrapping the fresh bandage, trying to ignore the way Kong Jae was watching him. I've patched up my share of injuries. Your brother was accident-prone? My brother was fearless. There's a difference. Jinwoo secured the bandage with medical tape. There. Try not to get it wet for 24 hours. Doctor's orders? Nurse's recommendations. Jinwoo stepped back, but Kong Jae caught his wrist with his uninjured hand. Jinwoo. His voice carried a note of uncertainty that seemed foreign coming from someone so controlled. What are we doing here? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to voice. Jinwoo was acutely aware of Kong Jae's thumb brushing across his pulse point, of the kitchen's intimate lighting, of the dangerous territory they were approaching. I don't know. It was the most honest answer he could give. I think about you. The confession emerged like it had been forced from him. More than I should. More than is wise. Kong Jae, you hate me. You should hate me. His grip tightened slightly. I've trapped you here, stolen your freedom, treated you like property. Yes, you have. Jinwoo didn't pull away. But I think about you too. The admission seemed to surprise them both. They stood frozen in the kitchen's artificial twilight, crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed, acknowledging feelings that complicated everything. This is insane. Kong Jae's voice was barely above a whisper. You're here because of a debt. Because I forced you to be. I know. I could destroy your life with a word. You already have. Then why? Because sometimes destruction looks like salvation from a different angle. Jinwoo met his eyes directly. Because June needs both of us. Because maybe we're saving each other and don't know it yet. Kong Jae's free hand came up to cup Jinwoo's cheek, thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone with reverent precision. This changes everything. Or nothing, depending on what we do next. They leaned toward each other like planets drawn into alignment, the space between them crackling with possibility and danger. Daddy, Jinwoo. Jun's voice echoed down the stairs. There's a spider in my bathroom, and it's huge. They sprang apart, the spell broken by childhood terror and practical necessity. But as they headed upstairs to confront Jun's arachnid nemesis, Jin-woo caught Kong Jae watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decode. Something had shifted between them in that kitchen. Something that would make the remaining years of his servitude either unbearable or unexpectedly bearable. He wasn't sure which possibility frightened him more. Your brother never stole anything. The words hit Jin-woo like ice water as he stared at the financial documents spread across Kong Jae's desk. 6 months of living in this marble prison. 6 months of believing he was paying for Min Jae's crimes. And now the truth lay before him in black and white. Falsified records, forged signatures, fabricated evidence. He'd found the files by accident, looking for Jun's school forms in Kong Jae's office while the man attended a business dinner. What he'd discovered instead was a folder marked Min Jae Settlement containing documents that prove his brother's innocence beyond any doubt. The real thief was Park Hyun-sik, Kong Jae's former head of accounting, a man who'd embezzled 50 million won over 18 months, then died in a heart attack before facing justice. Park had needed a scapegoat, and Min Jae, young, trusting, already dead, had been perfect. Jin-woo's hands shook as he photographed each page with his phone, documenting the evidence of his brother's innocence and his own wrongful imprisonment. The timestamps on the falsified transactions showed they'd been created weeks after Min Jae's death. The signature analysis revealed obvious forgeries. Even Kong Jae's own investigators had noted inconsistencies in their reports. Jin-woo. Jun's voice drifted from upstairs, probably looking for help with his evening reading practice. Coming. Jin-woo called back, but his voice cracked on the word. How could he face that innocent child now, knowing his father had built their entire relationship on a lie? He stuffed the documents back into their folder, mind racing. Kong Jae would return from dinner within the hour. Jin-woo could confront him then, demand his freedom, expose the truth. But what about Jun? What about the boy who'd started calling him Dad too, when he thought no one was listening? There you are. Jun bounced into the office, clutching his reading book. I finished the whole chapter without getting stuck once. Want to hear? Looking at Jun's bright, expectant face, Jin-woo felt something shatter inside his chest. This child had lost his mother, lived with a father too consumed by grief and guilt to connect properly, and had finally found stability with someone who would now disappear from his life as abruptly as he'd entered it. Of course I want to hear. Jin-woo managed a smile that felt like wearing broken glass. Let's go to your room. They settled on Jun's bed. The boy curled against Jin-woo's side as he read aloud with growing confidence. The words blurred in Jin-woo's vision, not because Jun was struggling, but because Jin-woo's eyes burned with unshed tears. You're sad, Jun observed, looking up with those perceptive eyes that saw too much. Is it because of the thing that makes you stare at walls sometimes? What thing? The missing someone thing. You get the same look Daddy used to get before you came here. Jun's fingers played with the sleeve of Jin-woo's shirt. Are you missing your brother? The simple question broke something loose in Jin-woo's chest. Yeah, buddy. I'm missing my brother. Do you think he can see us from heaven? Like how Mommy watches over me. Jin-woo pulled Jun closer, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. I think the people who love us never really leave. They just love us from somewhere different. Then he knows you're taking good care of me, right? He knows you're the best dad too ever. The casual endearment, one Jun had never used directly to his face before, nearly undid him completely. Jin-woo pressed his lips to the top of Jun's head, memorizing the moment before everything fell apart. I love you too, Jun. I know. Daddy loves you too, even though he's bad at saying it. Before Jin-woo could process that revelation, the sound of Kong Jae's car in the driveway announced the end of their borrowed time. Jin-woo tucked Jun in a bed with extra care, knowing it might be the last time. Sweet dreams, buddy. Jin-woo, you'll still be here when I wake up, right? The question pierced him like a blade. We'll see what tomorrow brings. It wasn't quite a lie, but it wasn't the truth Jun deserved either. Jin-woo found Kong Jae in the kitchen, loosening his tie with the weary movements of a man who'd spent too many hours in boardroom battles. How was dinner? Jin-woo asked, his voice artificially casual. Tedious. Corporate politics, masquerading as social engagement. Kong Jae glanced up, and his expression immediately sharpened. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have. Jin-woo pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the photo gallery. I found something interesting in your office tonight. The change in Kong Jae was instant, every muscle tensing, eyes going cold and calculating. You went through my private files? I was looking for June's school forms. You told me to get them signed by morning. Jin-woo's voice gained strength as righteous anger built in his chest. Instead, I found the truth about my brother. Kong Jae went very still. Jin-woo. Park Hyun-sik stole that money. Min Jae never touched a single one. Jin-woo held up his phone. I have photos of everything. The falsified documents, the forged signatures, your own investigators questioning the evidence. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. The words exploded from Jin-woo with 6 months of suppressed fury. You needed someone to pay for Park's crimes, and my dead brother was convenient. Just collateral damage in your need for justice. Kong Jae's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Which part? Framing an innocent man or enslaving his brother? I didn't know Park had framed Min Jae when I came for you. The admission came out strangled. I discovered the truth 3 weeks after you moved in. The timeline hit Jin-woo like a physical blow. 3 weeks. Kong Jae had known the truth before their first real conversation, before June's nightmares brought them together, before every moment of connection they'd shared. 3 weeks. Jin-woo's voice went deadly quiet. You've known for 5 months that I'm here under false pretenses. Yes. That my brother died innocent. Yes. That I've wasted 6 months of my life paying for crimes that never happened. Jin-woo, please. What? The word came out broken. Why keep me here once you knew? Kong Jae's composure finally cracked. Because June needed you. Because for the first time since Soo-jin died, this house felt like a home instead of a mausoleum. That's not your choice to make. You're right. It wasn't. Kong Jae took a step closer, hands raised in supplication. But I was selfish. I saw how you brought light back into June's life, how you made him laugh again. I saw how you looked at me like I was human instead of a monster. You are a monster. Jin-woo's voice shook with emotion. You stole 6 months of my life. You made me believe I owed you something when the only debt was your own cowardice in facing the truth. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back my freedom. Sorry doesn't undo the nights I lay awake hating myself for starting to care about you. The admission hung between them like a live wire. Kong Jae's eyes widened slightly. You care about me? I did. Past tense. Jin-woo moved toward the door. I'm packing my things. I'll be gone before June wakes up. You can't leave him. Kong Jae's voice cracked with desperation. He loves you. You're the closest thing to a parent he's had since Soo-jin died. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to play God with our lives. Jin-woo had reached the doorway when June's voice drifted from upstairs. Dad too? I had another nightmare. Can you make the water into chocolate milk again? The plaintive call stopped Jin-woo in his tracks. Behind him, he heard Kong Jae's sharp intake of breath. He's calling for you, Kong Jae whispered. Not me. You. Jin-woo closed his eyes, torn between fury and love, between justice and mercy. Up those stairs was a 7-year-old boy who'd already lost one parent and was about to lose the only stable figure he'd known since. A child who called him dad too and trusted him to chase away nightmares. This is what you've done, Jin-woo said without turning around. You've made it impossible for me to leave without destroying an innocent child. You've trapped us all in your web of lies. Jin-woo, I'll stay tonight. For June. But tomorrow, we're going to figure out how to untangle this mess without traumatizing your son. Jin-woo finally faced him, and Kong Jae flinched at the pain in his eyes. And then I'm leaving. Forever. Dad too. June called again, more urgently. Please. Jin-woo headed for the stairs, pausing only to deliver one final blow. You had everything, Kong Jae. A son who adored you. A chance at something real. And you threw it away because you were too proud to admit you made a mistake. He left Kong, Jay, standing alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of a family he'd built on lies and might have kept with truth. As Jin Woo climbed the stairs toward Jun's room, he wondered if love built on deception could ever transform into something genuine, or if some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. Behind him, he heard the sound of something breaking, whether it was glass or a man's heart. He couldn't tell. But for tonight, June needed him to turn nightmare water into chocolate milk, and that was a promise he could keep, even if it was the last one he'd ever make in this house.